You know, the EU released that report that spoke about water in 2050, showing that there will be a 6% decline in overall GDP, worldwide GDP, and most of the world will be water starved, if not water stressed. And I found this, you know, this was really quite interesting that they would come up with something like this, that they would issue a report out on something like this. And then I switched over to CNN, because I do keep an eye on what's going on in CNN. And you know, it's like it never happened. It's just like it, you know, it's like they may as well have said nothing. You know, again, they were covering, you know, stories that, you know, so the South Korea leader, and they covered that, and they covered a story that had to do with how Donald Trump is going to go visit Europe to open up his golf course, and he's arriving at the time that the UK is deciding, are they with the European Union or are they out of the European Union, and they covered that, and it astounds me that such a heavy report can come out and nothing is said of it. It's not even mentioned. It's like we're on a different planet. So I spent quite a bit of the week trying to figure out, you know, why is it? You know, why is it that we're not talking about this? Why is it that the world is not freaking out, man? I mean, why are we not freaking out about this? Why are we not running around in a mad panic? And then I realized that, you know, a lot of us are all in the same kind of boat. A lot of us experience a circular existence. You know, like things are, you know, that wake up, work, eat, sleep, repeat. You know, a day in and day out. It's the same thing we do. We live in the circular existence, and some of us are fortunate, and you can break out of that circular existence and make a phenomenal amount of money and be some famous person lying on a beach while people pamper you with palm leaves. But for the majority of people, we are stuck in this circular world, and in a way we're bored with this. In a way we've become so bored with the circular existence that we seek out drama in our lives that we can make important to ourselves. And you can see this, that, you know, why are people freaking out about them finding a black box in the Mediterranean that showed how a plane went down? Why is it really relevant to anyone? Why is it even spoken about here in South Africa? I mean, what has it got to do with any of us? You know, and it's a tragedy, don't get me wrong, but why is it? We seek it out and we talk about it because we're trying to add some color to an otherwise circular existence. We're trying to add some kind of meaning to an otherwise fairly dull, repetitive pattern of Monday to Friday we either work or you don't work, but Monday to Friday you work, and then Saturday you either drink too much, you exercise too much, or you go to church, or whatever your thing is, and you do this 52 weeks a year for the rest of your life. And what scares a lot of people is that you get to a certain age where you'll go to a restaurant, for argument's sake, or you will go to, you know, you'll go to the beach and you'll see old people, and like really old people. You know, they're grey hair, and the lady is either walking, carrying the guy, because ladies always seem to live longer than us guys, and that's in line for all of us. All of us are going to be those people that our entire life, our entire existence amounted to that. We will live our lives and end our lives, and nobody will know. Nobody will know. We'll never make a significant difference upon anything in the world. And so what we do is we tend to seek out drama to fill in or add color to our lives. And CNN operates on a bell curve where what people are talking about, and they choose to highlight that and make stories about that, so that you and I have something that takes away the kind of mental concept of where we're going. But I have a challenge for all of you that are watching this, and I've really thought this through. You see, there is actually in our time a revolution that needs to happen, and it is like your last revolution. It is an opportunity for you to make a real difference, to make a change in the way that this world is going, in the way that we are just cycling ourselves to the end, having a meaningless existence while the entire planet all around us and everything that we consider beautiful is slowly being whittled away until there is nothing left. There is news that is released this week that spoke about a 2030 date. This is 14 years away. 14 years away, in which the level of heat and the level of pollutants and the level of kind of topsoil losses that are getting into the ocean are lowering the kind of the ability of phytoplankton to absorb kind of CO2 and release oxygen. As you know, that phytoplankton, in fact the ocean, makes a large proportion of our oxygen. It was estimated to be around 60%, 65% of our oxygen. And the way that we are kind of, the things that we are doing to reverse this are not fast enough. They're just not enough. And nobody is really talking about it except for us here on ENN, the Mother Channel, and a bunch of scientists that are actually researching it. And there's a lot that we can actually do. We can change the way that we are farming. A beautiful report got put out in Norway that was done by one of the world's leading experts on food and sustainable food practice. And the guy is an expert. He is the foremost authority that was basically saying the impacts of the way that we are farming and the net impacts that it is having on carbon dioxide emissions, the impacts that it's having on the viability of continued growth in terms of food markets, the deficiency of the nutrients that is coming out in food crops based on the way that we're working, the level of pesticides that are not only going into our soils but are also flowing into our oceans. And he talks about a concept which I really like. It's an ecological shift. He called it agroecology. That was his word, actually. So agroecology, he's talking about converting the kind of farming into a more agroecological basis, based upon sustainability, based upon concepts like that are coming out of various different fields. The organic farming, permaculture, and these are lessons that have already been well documented, well studied. It's basic concepts: keeping soil covered, allowing nutrients in the soil to be retained to the soil. Another story that came out this week that is very important, but also it shows you how they're starting to come together. It was based around the extinction rate of river kind of life when you're building hydropower or damming any water for that matter. So what they were showing was the level of extinction that occurs every time you build a hydro plant. Now, previously hydro plants were considered to be ecologically viable. They were considered to be a green mechanism, and it's true in that the method that they are generating power is a cleaner method for generating power, using the flow of the water to create the current. But what happens is, because they're building these monster-ass dams, and it's a persistent concept of dammed water, released water, pumped water, dammed water, released water. It's on and on. It's a cycle that goes. It wipes out everything inside of the water system below it, because there's no longer any nutrients inside the water. The sediment buildup is sitting behind the dam. The kind of free movement of kind of foodstuffs and migration of fish life is completely stunted. And it's the concepts that are starting to emerge, and how Hello and welcome to the Mother Channel. My name is Jason Saul, and today we are reporting live from the steps of the beautiful Rhodes Memorial in the Mother City, Cape Town. The Mother Channel is the channel that brings you the news, live interviews, and current events that are happening around the world in terms of the environment, climate change, and various other topics that are related to sustainability. One of the reasons why we're filming from here as opposed to our normal locations in the deep south or near the beach or in the beautiful rolling forests is that we're going to go watch a movie called Normal Is Over, which is a movie that won numerous awards at the Cannes Film Festival. It's a strikingly good story and well done, well put together. And I urge you, if you have an opportunity, to go check it out, see what you think for yourself, and maybe post some reviews about what you think about it below. We will, of course, add a link below me over here that will tell you a bit about it and give you a little taster of what it's like. The first story, and probably one of the most important stories, is related to the sea levels and the rising of the sea, which has for a long period of time been used by global warming skeptics as an indicator of whether or not global warming is actually happening or not. Now, one of the problems being is they've started recording accurately from space, in this case, sea level rise since 1991. And for a long period of time, there'd only been an annual increase of roughly 3 millimeters per year. And for most of this period, global warming skeptics have used this to their advantage to state that global warming is simply not happening. Take a look at the sea levels. Nothing seems to be showing on the sea levels, and thus the entire concept of climate change or man-made climate change is completely flawed. Further analysis of this information has picked up that in 1991, since the records started, there was a massive volcanic explosion. In fact, one of the largest recorded since 1991, and the output of that volcanic ash actually caused a global sea level decrease. And so as a result, the starting block for this data was it started off on a low level, and thus it made a flaw, an ongoing flaw that was picked up inside of the information going forward. And they expect now that the events, or rather the chemical the atmospheric makeup has started to subside as a result of that volcanic activity. They expect to see a far more dramatic increase in the level of sea level that is happening at the moment. There has actually been a massive reduction in the amount of food being taken up by, in this case, humpback whales. They are one of the toothed whale species. They go along with killer whales and dolphins, obviously, but humpback whales in specific, as part of their hunting lines, they dive down deep below the ocean, they roll onto their side and they scoop up eels that formed a large proportion of their diet. They can hold their breath for 30 minutes, so it wasn't a big problem for them. But as they started studying, trying to see what would happen, they noticed that as ships were passing, that the whales were no longer able to scoop up the fish. They would actually pull out of their dive, and they've realized that either they're picking up the transoceanic traffic as being a threat to them and pulling out their dive, or they are unable to accurately sense where the ground floor is in order for them to turn it over, scoop up their meal. And this is to a certain extent, whales have in a way adapted to the level of noise that is made by this kind of traffic. But this is the first study that goes to show that our impact upon whale species is actually having a longer term negative effect. It remains to be seen whether this impacts other species, but the study is still ongoing. In Croatia, a series of events that took place that basically increased temperatures around the seas, around the oceans, basically caused the dieback of 10,000 fish. Now, this was a huge problem. Thousands of people flocked to the beaches, and they were stumbled across this insane sight where the whole ocean floor was just filled and filled and filled with thousands and thousands of fish dying. And this was a big problem. Obviously, it was a big smell. The authorities basically stepped in. They stopped people from picking up the fish. Obviously, they're poisonous because they've been sitting out in the sun. As it turns out, the water is too hot, and this hotness has basically caused massive oxygen drops inside of the water, which brought about the demise of fish. and the fish were basically trying to escape these zones of low oxygen, and this is what caused the event. Now, although they say it is a semi-natural event, it has never been recorded on this volume before. They've never seen the number of fish species like this before. Very similar event happened just later this week, but this time in Tanzania. And I think what you're actually starting to see is the impact of greater temperatures on the surface of various lakes, closed bodies, and obviously the ocean, and it's starting to play its role. Fourth story, I brought this up. This was in relation to a release that we did. We were talking about microplastics, but at the same time, we also had a discussion about renewable energy. And I went on and on about how China was playing a big role towards, they had an ambition, the termite mind, that basically once it focuses on getting rid of climate change or getting rid of their emissions, that everything kind of just focuses on that and they start acting upon it. Of interest, China, just almost 2 days after I issued that report, issued their statement basically saying that they intend to have 1/5, 20% of their entire energy requirements completely off-grid by 2030. Now this is a big undertaking. They intend to do it by wind. At the moment, just to show you the kind of extent that they're doing, at the moment China is powered 147 megawatts of their supply from wind. Combined, that is larger and more power than what they're doing in the entire area of Europe, entire area of the United States in terms of wind power. China has also gone ahead and said that this is just the beginning. They're going to try and do more, but adding photovoltaics in their case. And it just goes to show you that when you have a concerted mind driven on the point, getting rid of these harmful emissions caused by coal-fired power stations, nuclear power stations, that you can actually do it, that it is achievable. And not only is it achievable, it's achievable by large economies. We also have to weigh this up with the fact, though, that China basically produces roughly 70% of the world's global emissions in terms of carbon and CO2 emissions and methane, and they cause a lot of damage, but it's a really good step on their behalf, something that they've taken forward and something that we're really impressed about here on the Mother Channel. Our final story is in relation to an event that came out in the United States, and I find this quite ironic because we did cover microplastics and other chemical pollutants that were entering the waterways. Well, in the United States, a new study that's been done has found that there's a kind of toxin, or rather a chemical called PFAS. You can go Google it. As I said, I'll add the link below us. And what it is industrial chemicals that are used in the washing process, also in the manufacture of various bags, manufacturing of different kind of industrial components, often used as a fire kind of retardant in terms of airports and military bases, etc. And they found that roughly 6 million American people are affected by this phenomenon of increased toxins inside of the water, increased chemicals inside of the water, and it's having a long-term negative effect. It can cause obesity, cause cancer, and obviously have various other genetic effects that can impact upon the populace. And this is just goes hand in hand with that kind of story that we did about microplastics, where we're talking about how we don't really take care of our groundwater, how we don't take care of our waterways, and how the runoff of chemicals is starting to have an impact on people. And here you have a prime example, a study done by MIT in relation to the amount of kind of toxins and chemicals inside the water is now not only detectable, but they believe that the effects may be wider spread, meaning that it's, in this case, it goes across 33 states, but they believe it may be wider spread than that. They believe it may be impacting more people, and that the events or the effects of it are yet to be seen, but it is unacceptably high, and there's very, very little that they can actually do about it. This is water that is done, goes back into the kind of estuaries, goes back into the underground aquifers, and is drawn up for use by the municipalities or the councils in order to provide drinking water. And there's nothing you can do in terms of neutralizing the chemicals in it, and thus it brings about a massive problem in terms of drinking supply. Now, you'll probably find, in my opinion, that since it's having a direct impact upon people, that you might find that the municipalities or the councils or the government, they act a lot faster. But I bear with me a little on this, I just find it a little funny that they act upon it when it has a direct impact, that they are able to notice, able to see, they're able to kind of respond to it, but nobody is talking about the other kind of areas that are surrounding it that are obviously awash with chemicals, generally flooding out into the oceans, into large lake bodies, and nobody's really accounting for that, mainly because it's not part of the drinking supply. But obviously it's having an impact on the biology or the biomechanisms of all those ocean species or fish species or algae species or really beneficial kind of requirements of a generally healthy ecosystem. So I think that this is a story that you're starting to see like a little front tip of, and I expect that this is going to go a hell of a lot further very, very soon. Now, we're wrapping this up because we're going to go out and watch that movie. I hope you've enjoyed my update. It's been a little bit chaotic because we're kind of in a public place and a whole lot of people walking up and down, so I expect a few jump cuts here and there. As usual, if you've got any good stories that are happening in an area around you, take a clip, send it in, we'll screen it up. And I would like to thank you for joining me on this beautiful day, well, overcast day for us, but a beautiful day, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the Mother Channel. My name is Jason Saul, and today we are reporting live from the steps of the beautiful Rhodes Memorial in the Mother City, Cape Town. The Mother Channel is the channel that brings you news, live interviews and current events that are happening around the world in terms of the environment, climate change and various other topics that are related to sustainability. One of the reasons why we're filming from here as opposed to our normal locations in the deep south or near the beach or in the beautiful rolling forests is that we're going to go watch a movie called Normal Is Over, which is a movie that won numerous awards at the Cannes Film Festival. It's a strikingly good story and well done, well put together. And I urge you, if you have an opportunity, to go check it out, see what you think for yourself, and maybe post some reviews about what you think about it below. We will, of course, add a link below me over here that will tell you a bit about it and give you a little taster of what it's like. The first story, and probably one of the most important stories, is related to the sea levels and the rising of the sea, which has for a long period of time been used by global warming skeptics as an indicator of whether or not global warming is actually happening or not. Now, one of the problems being is they've started recording accurately from space, in this case, sea level rise since 1991. And for a long period of time, there'd only been an annual increase of roughly 3 millimeters per year. And for most of this period, global warming skeptics have used this to their advantage to state that global warming is simply not happening. Take a look at the sea levels. Nothing seems to be showing on the sea levels, and thus the entire concept of climate change or man-made climate change is completely flawed. Further analysis of this information has picked up that in 1991, since the records started, there was a massive volcanic explosion. In fact, one of the largest recorded since 1991, and the output of that volcanic ash actually caused a global sea level decrease. And so as a result, the starting block for this data was it started off on a low level, and thus it made a flaw, an ongoing flaw that was picked up inside of the information going forward. And they expect now that the events, or rather the chemical kind of the atmospheric makeup, has started to subside as a result of that volcanic activity. They expect to see a far more dramatic increase in the level of sea level that is happening at the moment. There has actually been a massive reduction in the amount of food being taken up by, in this case, humpback whales. They are one of the toothed kind of whale species. They go along with killer whales and dolphins, obviously. But humpback whales in specific, as part of their hunting kind of lines, they dive down deep below the ocean. They roll onto their side and they scoop up eels that formed a large proportion of their diet. They can hold their breath for 30 minutes, so it wasn't a big problem for them. But as they started studying, trying to see what would happen, they noticed that as ships were passing, that the whales were no longer able to scoop up the fish. They would actually pull out of their dive, and they've realized that either they're picking up the kind of transoceanic traffic as being a threat to them and pulling out their dive, or they are unable to accurately sense where the ground floor is in order for them to turn it over, scoop up their meal. And this is to a certain extent, whales have in a way adapted to the level of noise that is made by this kind of traffic. But this is the first study that goes to show that our impact upon whale species is actually having a longer term negative effect. It remains to be seen whether this impacts other species, but the study is still ongoing. In Croatia, a series of kind of events that took place that basically increased temperatures around the seas, around the oceans, basically caused the dieback of 10,000 fish. Now this was a huge problem. Thousands of people flocked to the beaches, and they were stumbled across this insane sight where the whole ocean floor was just filled and filled and filled with thousands and thousands of fish dying. And this was a big problem. Obviously, it was a big smell. The authorities basically stepped in. They stopped people from picking up the fish. Obviously, they're poisonous because they've been sitting out in the sun. As it turns out, the water is too hot, and this hotness has basically caused massive oxygen drops inside of the water, which brought about the demise of fish. And the fish were basically trying to escape these zones of low oxygen, and this is what caused the event. Now, although they say it is a semi-natural event, it has never been recorded on this volume before. They have never seen the number of fish species like this before. Very similar event happened just later this week, but this time in Tanzania. And I think what you're actually starting to see is the impact of greater temperatures on the surface of various lakes, closed bodies, and obviously the ocean, and it's starting to play its role. Fourth story, I brought this up. This was in relation to a release that we did. We were talking about microplastics, but at the same time, we also had a discussion about renewable energy. And I went on and on about how China was playing a big role towards, they had an ambition, the termite mind, that basically once it focuses on getting rid of climate change or getting rid of their emissions, that everything kind of just focuses on that and they start acting upon it. Of interest, China, just almost 2 days after I issued that report, issued their statement basically saying that they intend to have 1/5, 20% of their entire energy requirements completely off-grid by 2030. Now this is a big undertaking. They intend to do it by wind. At the moment, just to show you the kind of extent that they're doing, at the moment China is powered 147 megawatts of their supply from wind. Combined, that is larger and more power than what they're doing in the entire area of Europe, the entire area of the United States in terms of wind power. China has also gone ahead and said that this is just the beginning. They're going to try and do more, but adding photovoltaics in their case. And it just goes to show you that when you have a concerted mind driven on the point, getting rid of these harmful emissions caused by coal-fired power stations, nuclear power stations, that you can actually do it, that it is achievable. And not only is it achievable, it's achievable by large economies. We also have to weigh this up with the fact, though, that China basically produces roughly 70% of the world's global emissions in terms of carbon and CO2 emissions and methane, and they cause a lot of damage, but it's a really good step on their behalf, something that they've taken forward and something that we're really impressed about here on the Mother Channel. Our final story is in relation to an event that came out in the United States, and I find I find this quite ironic because we did cover microplastics and other chemical pollutants that were entering the waterways. Well, in the United States, a new study that's been done has found that there's a kind of toxin, or rather a chemical called PFAS. You can go Google it. As I said, I'll add the link below us. And what it is industrial chemicals that are used in the washing process, also in the manufacture of various bags, manufacturing of different kind of industrial components, often used as a fire kind of retardant in terms of airports and military bases, etc. And they found that roughly 6 million American people are affected by this phenomenon of increased toxins inside of the water, increased chemicals inside the water, and it's having a long-term negative effect. It can cause obesity, cause cancer, and obviously have various other genetic effects that can impact upon the populace. And this just goes hand in hand with that kind of story that we did about microplastics, where we're talking about how we don't really take care of our groundwater, how we don't take care of our waterways, and how the runoff of chemicals is starting to have an impact on people. And here you have a prime example, a study done by MIT in relation to the amount of kind of toxins and chemicals inside the water is now not only detectable, but they believe that the effects may be wider spread, meaning that it's, in this case, it goes across 33 states, but they believe it may be wider spread than that. They believe it may be impacting more people, and that the events or the effects of it are yet to be seen, but it is unacceptably high, and there's very, very little that they can actually do about it. This is water that is done, goes back into the kind of estuaries, goes back into the underground aquifers, and is drawn up for use by the municipalities or the councils in order to provide drinking water. And there's nothing you can do in terms of neutralizing the chemicals in it, and thus it brings about a massive problem in terms of drinking supply. Now, you'll probably find, in my opinion, that since it's having a direct impact upon people, that you might find that the municipalities or the councils or the government, they act a lot faster. But I bear with me a little on this, I just find it a little funny that they act upon it when it has a direct impact, that they are able to notice, able to see, they're able to kind of respond to it, but nobody is talking about the other kind of areas that are surrounding it that are obviously awash with chemicals, generally flooding out into the oceans, into large lake bodies, and nobody's really accounting for that, mainly because it's not part of the drinking supply. But obviously it's having an impact on the biology or the biomechanisms of all those ocean species or fish species or algae species or really beneficial kind of requirements of a generally healthy ecosystem. So I think that this is a story that you're starting to see like a little front tip of, and I expect that this is going to go a hell of a lot further very, very soon. Now, we're wrapping this up because we're going to go out and watch that movie. I hope you've enjoyed my update. It's been a little bit chaotic because we're kind of in a public place and a whole lot of people walking up and down, so I expect a few jump cuts here and there. As usual, if you've got any good stories that are happening in an area around you, take a clip, send it in, we'll screen it up. And I would like to thank you for joining me on this beautiful day, well, overcast day for us, but a beautiful day, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. How the pollutants, now if you imagine surrounding a dam or any kind of enclosed water system, the level of pollutants runoff that comes from farming. So now because they don't cover their topsoil, water is unable to accumulate, it's unable to get to the water aquifer, the sub aquifer. And it's also not retained in the topsoil for other organisms to use. So what happens is there's a lot of runoff caused going into various different dams. Now you have a farmer, and what the farmer does is he's got an issue with some bug or some other whatever bug, and he goes and sprays his crops with pesticides. You see them, they're dusting, and that runoff of the poisons or the pesticides goes into the water system. From the water system, all rivers flow to the sea. And what's happening is you're having a huge, almost like a source of poison, where before you would have these seawater nurseries, or what they call estuaries, these large mouths in which there was a mixture between seawater and fresh water, and it would be like a nursery for many different kinds of fish. And now all it is becoming is it's poisoning different kinds of fish. You've got fish larvae that has been impacted by microplastics. You've got huge amounts of pesticides pouring out into the oceans, and all of this is starting to have an overall effect, of which we're seeing. And a good example of our overall effect is, I don't know, remember about last month, we reported on India having a 51-degree temperature. Well, India this month again broke its new record. So it's actually climbed above itself. So it was 52.6 degrees. So the impacts of what we're doing, even though it's not happening here in this beautiful place, or you may be sitting wherever you are watching this, it is happening. They lost, the Indonesian chain lost 5 islands. They're completely submerged. They're underwater. The impacts of what we are doing is starting to be easily discoverable. It's no longer groundbreaking scientific research that comes out. Now I'll tell you, this is a little bit complicated what I'm going to say now about this report that was based on anti-global warming kind of skeptics, or global warming skeptics rather. They always claimed that one of their big kind of bullets that they always used to fire was so boring, listening to them go on and on, like trying to dredge up science that has been long, kind of solved. But anyway, one of their things was they were saying, look, if you look at the Arctic, and you see like the Arctic looks, is got a certain kind of pattern and a lot of collection of pollution, a lot of collection of carbon dioxide, and there is water runoff, obviously, that's happening in the Arctic, and it's viable and visible, and we can report on this. Oh my Lord.
No, don't worry, Joe.
Okay, all right. Sorry, I'm just watching the wildlife behind us just like freaking out, but we're fine. The wildlife is freaking out, but we're okay. So I'm really okay. But then they always so then they always pointed to Antarctica. And they said, ha, but look there, in Antarctica, you're not seeing any of this. It goes to show you that carbon dioxide how can carbon dioxide only be having effect in the Arctic? It's not happening in the Antarctica, and therefore it cannot be carbon dioxide or global warming based on carbon dioxide. It cannot be like this. And so, again, inside of this week, another report was issued as to why Antarctica is not showing any signs of kind of melt. Well, the same degree of melt, there is still obviously melt. And what was proven was that the water temperature at the top is increasing, but because Antarctica has deeper kind of chasms all around us, much deeper water, they've got ancient freezing water that's been sitting without contact with sunlight for hundreds of thousands of years, and that water is being lifted to the surface. So as the top water heats up, it lowers the pressure, the groundwater starts to rise up to the surface, makes like a bit of a convection, but with that it brings a whole new cooling into that area. It's actually keeping the bottom of Antarctica cool, it's keeping the seas around Antarctica cool. Now obviously there is a life span to how long it can do this, because even it's not an endless supply of ancient water, but there is a convectional layer that's happening, that's a thermal layer if you want, that's allowing the cooling impact of that water to be raised to the surface, and therefore is protecting Antarctica. Now the joke of this whole thing is that if you think about it, there was always going to be a logical reason. People that are around you that are, global warming skeptics or climate change skeptics, whatever you want to call them, they will always try and latch on to something else, like something else, And every time they've latched onto something, we had the heat island effect, we had solar radiation effect, we had they're always trying to latch onto something, because if you accept that the climate change is a really real event, take a look at just where we are. We're in the middle of winter, and it's kind of like a heat wave here. The UK is having floods and cold temperatures, and Europe as well. And it's record lows that are happening in Europe. And yet here we are, and we're still debating the science. Anybody that is coming up with a concept that that says anything that climate change is bullshit, because you've just got to stop listening. You've got to actually just tune your brain out, because they actually have no idea what they're talking about. And for every argument they keep bringing against it, in a matter of months, that argument is torn to pieces, scientifically torn to pieces, and refuted. So it's a waste of time, it's a waste of energy. And you know, the events on the ground are starting to become easily observable, and we've really got to start to change our story. We've really got to start. And that's what I was trying to get back to, you know, like here we sit as just normal people doing normal things on a normal daily basis. And we've got to understand that we are the last people that can bring about some change. There is one big revolution left for every person watching this. Every single person. There is one big revolution, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen. We have to start to change the way the world is working. And the only way we are going to do this is when we start to talk about it, when we bring it up to mainstream media, when we apply pressure on politicians to start to change the way your countries are being run. And until politicians are started to be vetted, not on, hey, I'll give you all great jobs and we'll stop buying from China, and until they are vetted on their green credentials, their credentials to build a sustainable future for your country, for your kids, for your grandchildren, until that happens, nothing is going to change. The power that be will continue to vest ourselves in oil, gas, fracking, any source of easy power, any source of easy money. And that's what they're going to keep doing. But the revolution is real. It's happening now. You need to join in. You need to join us on ENN. Why am I the only guy talking on ENN? Why hasn't some guy in the United States, or some guy in UK, or some guy in Australia, or some guy in China, wherever, sent in a clip exactly like my clip explaining what's going on in China? Let's find out what's going on in China, what's going on in the United States. Start reporting on events that are happening around you. Let's bring those events, let's make it part of the mainstream media, and together we can actually start to change the world. That's about all that I've got for you today. Remember, we are looking for people to submit stories. I've just covered that. The baboons are starting to worry me a little, so I think I'm probably going to split really fast any moment now. So without further ado, I hope you guys have a great week. I'll chat to you probably in the middle of this week again, and maybe again at the end of the weekend. So have a great week, have a great day, and I'll see you later. Hello and good morning everyone. My name is Jason Saul. I'm reporting live for the Environmental News Network, coming to you from the Mother Channel. We are filming today in the Constantia, the Groot-Constantia Valley. As you can see behind me, it's that backdrop that is absolutely beautiful, and last time we were here was filled with baboons. So our producers seem to think that since I was not attacked last time, that it is a fairly safe location. And they also just happened to mention that should I be attacked, it would make for some great footage. Apparently that goes down very well and gets a lot of hits if you see people getting attacked by baboons. So I'm going to cover a couple of stories today, and then I'm going to revert back to a little kind of line that I think we need to start talking about. The first stories are related, in fact they're closely related, and it's something that all of you can actually pick up on. There was a study that was recently done in the Arctic relating to the volume of methane that is still trapped within the Arctic. Now they estimate that roughly 1,000 gigatons of methane is trapped under the permafrost within the Arctic. The good news about this is, for the moment, it appears that it is remaining stable. In other words, there's not a lot of leaking of either methane or carbon dioxide, because certain processes take place that will either strip the water down and put it into the riverways, into the runways, and it will actually convert it to a carbon dioxide as opposed to a methane. But for the moment, they appear to be remaining stable while the temperature remains consistent. Now, scientists have been concerned about this mainly because they have picked up sporadic, so meaning like they've picked up increase in temperatures, daily increase in temperatures, but overall the net impact that it's have on climate, which is the big difference between weather and climate. Weather is something that happens in a short space of time, like what is the weather today? It's windy and middle of winter, whereas climate is the averaged conditions over a long period of time. So anyway, this has been happening, and because the climate has remained still, even though it's climbing, it's still remained within what is considered tolerable to keep it in a permafrost condition, it's still stable, which is good news. However, if you then consider a report that came out from Alaska regarding a phenomena that they're calling watermelon snow or pink snow, I think the two are actually related, and here's why, okay? Pink snow is basically a buildup of algae, so algae and certain bacteria that eat kind of vegetation matter and things that were trapped underneath the snow. And as a result of their eating of these things, their bodies discolor, and it creates the effect, what is called pink snow. Now, pink snow is problematic, okay? First of all, you can't eat it, so don't anyone go there thinking it's like strawberry, I'm going to eat the snow, it's really bad for you, it's highly toxic. It's not great, okay? But the problem is with a little effect called the albedo effect. And what we know about the albedo effect is that basically it's an indicator of the amount of light that is reflected. So if you imagine a pure white surface that is snow, it reflects, close on 90 to 95% of all light. So light hits snow, reflects out, and this is what keeps the area cool. However, now that the snow is pink, there is a dramatic reduction in the albedo effect. In this case, it's down to about 30%. So the snow is actually absorbing a lot more energy and therefore a lot more heat, and that in turn is causing a lot more melt, and that in turn is actually causing more albedo effect. So there's actually a little loop that is happening within that, a small feedback loop that is happening within that area, and you can expect this to increase. Now, in my opinion, which is a layman's opinion, my opinion is that what you're seeing in Alaska is what is going to be soon seen in the Arctic, because the algae and the bacteria are there primarily to eat the decomposing matter that is trapped beneath the ice. So my feeling is that the watermelon pink snow is actually an early warning of a decomposition process within that area, and I think you're going to see a lot more of this, and I think it's something to keep an eye on. And just remember, everyone, please, no eating the snow. Some good news came out of Germany today. Remember in my last kind of update to you, I said that I'll be giving you some good news. Well, the good news was, first of all, that the methane remains stable. Some other good news that came in from Germany today is that they've banned fracking. Hydraulic press fracking in this case. That now it has no direct impact upon their oil and kind of refining kind of stuff that they're doing. They will still continue with oil and refining, but for the meantime, they have completely banned all fracking, which is a great step forward for Germany. I must also just say that I've had a lot of online battles because I'm a bit of a troll when it comes to that. I go on to a lot of pro-oil, pro kind of methane, pro-fracking kind of sites, and I voice my opinion and I try to convert people. I've had running arguments with lobbyists for fracking. It's actually a strange concept if you think about it, but the fracking industry has employed professional lobbyists, and their sole job is to change the minds of you, okay? That's their job. So what they would do is that they've got huge budgets where I've got no budget, okay? They've got massive budgets, no budget, okay? And their massive budgets, they basically take a whole lot of professional people. These are people that they work out great advertising. These are people that work out how to word something, so copywriters. These are people that have entrances to the newspaper, and they will find anything that has even slightly some positive kind of return for fracking, and they will push it. They will pay for media advertising. They will make sure it's leaked to all the press. They will make sure that it hits on all your Facebook accounts and hits on any other possible news source that they can, and they try to make the science of fracking sound credible.
Whereas already we know that fracking is not credible. Fracking is not a credible way of conducting business. And the way that they go about raising money for fracking is absolutely mind-numbing. It's based on that whole concept of where you completely discount the negative effects that you have upon the environment, and you only solely focus upon the cash that you can obtain and return back to your investors. In this case, the investors are super happy, pockets full of cash, but the people that are living in those areas, commonly in water-restricted areas, are suffering because of leak that's gone back into their waterways. Some people have completely run out of water, and they still believe it is viable. So now what the fracking industry has done, and I'm convinced that this is actually a twist from the fracking industry, although I haven't actually gone into it much, but they've had a couple of scientists, they've employed a bunch of scientists, and what those scientists did is they developed a method that would change what they're doing in terms of fracking. So in fracking, they will inject water, sand, and generally a bunch of other chemicals into the soil, and via the pressure, almost like a sponge system, they will squeeze out the oil. Well, in this case, the scientists said, look, I've got an idea. We will inject carbon dioxide into that kind of mixture as well. And so in a state, it's liquefied carbon dioxide. So in its state, they are now proposing it forward as a means of carbon sequestration. Now, I see it personally as a desperate attempt by the fracking industry to somehow gain back some kind of green footprint that they lost long ago after they poisoned people's wells and lost court battles in the United States. But nevertheless, they've now started to pay scientists, and us in the climate change, kind of world, we've seen this before. We saw it when Exxon, previously a big proponent or a supporter of climate change and the science behind climate change, did that amazing about shift where they all of a sudden started paying thousands and thousands of scientists just to cast doubt on climate change. And so a lot of the people that you have running around, those morons that go, oh, the climate change is not real. It's not real, I tell you, the science is false. All those people, they have merely been influenced by the work that Exxon has done in terms of funding scientists to come up with absolute rubbish about why the science of climate change and why the science behind climate change is false. Now, I'll come back to that in a minute. I'm going to cover one more little story. I want to bring this up because I think that this is kind of relevant. Okay, so they've now just finished in the United States. They've finished mapping the impact that renewables is having upon coal, and therefore coal upon renewables. And they handed it over to some MIT graduates. They said, calculate the kind of chain, the financial viability of this all. Now, as you know, coal is a cheap form of energy, and thus it's always put forward to we need some power stations. Let's build a coal station. In China, they were building a coal station like every week. Every week, a new coal-fired power station will go up because it's got to feed China's expanding economy. But the thing is that for the first time, they were actually able to mathematically prove the impact that renewables was having upon coal and the financial viability that renewables was having upon coal. So they were saying that where before coal could be considered a cheap form of power, that renewables is now playing a part, that the line between the two is really, really thin, meaning that they're actually almost neck on neck in terms of renewable versus coal. Now, renewable as based in the US is considerably more expensive than everywhere else because they've got I don't know why, but it's much more expensive by comparison to here in South Africa. In South Africa, we produce renewable energy at a really cheap rate, whereas in the United States it seems to be dramatically more expensive. Not sure why, but the point is that if you go, there was a study done by a hackathon group, which I like, that was basically, they produced a coal map. So if you go online, you go Google coal map, you will see the impacts and the studies that were done in this regard. And you will see very clearly that the one missing point that they did from this whole mixture is the same missing point that they've done in Germany, that they've also just done now, where they've completely excluded the byproduct of coal, which is carbon dioxide. So inside of their calculations, again, like any industry, like the methane industry, like the fracking industry, they completely ignore the impact that their industry has upon the environment. So they say, hey, it's like nothing. You know, hey man, we just produce all this coal, all this carbon dioxide goes up into the air.
And sulfur.
and sulfur goes up into the air. But you know, it's okay. It's okay because there's the return for our investors. And this is again what we touched upon last week. The entire business world is geared completely towards this return for investors without taking into account the actual cost of their business. And I find that mathematically flawed. I don't know. I'm not even a math whiz, and I find it mathematically flawed. How is it that you can develop a business model, a business concept, business idea, a business that basically goes around destroying the environment for the majority of the planet, destroys the Great Barrier Reef, is intending to wipe out fish populations, but somehow there is absolutely no feedback onto you as a result of having a pathetically destructive business like this? How is it that when you form your business model, you don't take into account the removal of the toxins that you produce as part of that same business model? So my thinking is that if there was one shift that we could do inside of the business world, it would for people to actually start to account for the impact that their business has on the environment, and to introduce steps that would first evaluate a business on that criteria, and then, assuming that it's an existing business, to alter their business model so that it does not have an impact. And this can be a tiny business, this can be a giant business. If you take a look at businesses that have no real kind of like, they're paper trail businesses like insurance, or like cell phone networks, or like whatever, like businesses that aren't really directly involved with mining or industry or destruction. I say that, but in the back of my mind, even as I said that, I forget about the volume of paper that the insurance industry is consumed. But forgetting about that for the moment, but it can involve things like how many employees they have and how those employees get to work. It can be involved with concepts like who they decide to sponsor. Why is it that they're sponsoring? Why are they sponsoring concepts and ideas like horse shows? Like there's a horse show. Here we are in a planet that is in absolute state of destruction, and they're busy sponsoring horse shows. Your money that you think is going towards something decent is in fact just rolling out to be another nothing, another really nice horse show. And no offense to the horse show people, I'm sure their horse show is really important to them, but in reality, what's important now is changing the environment. It's changing the destruction to the environment and changing the way that we evaluate things. And this is my final point today, because I'm going to try not to go on too long, okay? But this is my final point today. I've been thinking quite a bit, and everywhere that I go, I sit down in place, I sit down in a restaurant, I meet people, I talk to people, and I've noticed that there is a beautiful bleeding that happens as a result of my discussions, as a result of the information that I am doing. And I explained this a bit in my last kind of movie, where I told you that it's like you can see this kind of glossed over look in their eyes, and as you slowly start to give them the information, you're letting people know about like the absolute insanity that is happening around us right now, that we're not even watching, we're not even hearing the craziness that is going on. If they just took a minute to actually look at the madness that's going in the deoxygenated oceans, to the massive acidification that's happening, to the increasing carbon dioxide, to the melting glaciers, to the impact that as a species we're having on this planet, that you would bring about some change. You will bring about some change. You can see the light come on. I've had a person that I've been talking to frequently has all of a sudden started to share like information that we give them. They research it and they share it. They're putting it on their own Facebook profile. They're letting people know. They're spreading the word. And this comes to my final point. I'm sorry to return back to this twice, but there is a beautiful concept. It's called cognitive dissonance. And what that is it's the alteration, or it's having a duality. It's what I do is not what I say. It's having the contrast between my actions and my intentions, or it is basically the very thing that shapes all culture. It shapes society. It is the contrast between I don't like this place where I am, I don't like this thing where I am, even though the majority rule sets it like this. It is that fight, that struggle that brings about revolution. It is that argument that we have amongst people that ultimately results in some change. And then when I go sit in a restaurant and I listen to the things that people are talking about, and I listen to the things that people are, like they're on their tiny little individualistic worlds, and I'm sure it's important to them. I'm not trying to say that they're all retards. I'm just saying that they're all retards. They're basically focusing their entire lives upon the things that are important to the individual. There are people that are talking about doing trips and going shopping, and although those things are important to those people, they are missing the real picture. People need to start talking about the environment. As I am talking to you, you need to talk to somebody else. There needs to be a revolution that happens within the culture of how we accept business, of how we accept the world around us. We cannot continue to destroy everything around us in favor of what? In favor of money, in favor of a larger company, in favor of shiny cars. We can't have this anymore. We can't. And the fact that we just think we can, and the media that we watch fools us into thinking that those things can still be done, but they can't. We already know that we're 15 years away from severe water restriction. 15 years. This isn't long. This isn't something, but don't worry, in the future they'll fix it. This is something right now. Now, as a person, listen, the mere fact that you're watching this, the mere fact that you even took the time to watch this means that you and I are awake to it. And you need to start to play your role. You need to start to change the people around you. You need to start to communicate. You need to start to spread it. You need to, like a virus, inject your DNA into their mindset so that we are bringing about a change. That when we next sit in a restaurant, every person is only talking about it. And only then, once we've got an aggregate, a huge movement, a massive revolution that is happening, only then will we start to shape the planet around us. And the only way we're going to do it is by you watching me watching you, and us sharing the information. So I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my show. I hope I didn't go on too long, but please, I'll be pushing out another one probably Wednesday this week, bringing you up to date on all the news events that are happening. It's a beautiful day here in Cape Town, and I hope you're going to have a beautiful day wherever you are. Thank you, and enjoy your day.
Hello and good morning. Welcome to a quick interlude with Environmental News Network. We are sitting in the beautiful Constantia Valley, and frankly it's pouring like hell outside, so we're actually having to film inside. Yes, that said, it is still nasty and cold. We're doing a midweek one. We can see that it's already growing quite popularly over kind of, since we've been doing these. So we're going to do a little midweek one, just catch you up from early week stuff. So I'm going to cover 5 stories. One story I really love, man, I really love, and you will love this too. And it is so powerful in terms of what we should and what we shouldn't be doing. So the first story that I'm going to cover is just something that irritates the hell out of me. About 2 weeks ago on E&M we covered this farmer that went off and started poisoning carcasses so he could kill vultures, and and there was this whole knock-on effect about how he went and basically wiped out, I think it was 5 or 6 endangered Cape vultures. Well, now it turns out we've got another genius farmer, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be negative or nasty about farmers, but frankly, I mean, they've got to start just working with nature just a little bit, and here we've got in the Namibian desert, there's a certain species of lion, and it's a normal lion in terms of its genus, but it's adapted specifically for the desert environment. It's got thicker skin, it retains water better, and there was basically a small pride of these lions that was in the Namibian desert, and one really big, beautiful male that was just recently shot. By some idiot farmer, because maybe it took a cow, or it took a sheep, or it took some creature. But at the end of the day, he's basically made those specific brand of desert lions completely extinct in that area. In fact, that was the last of the desert lions in that area. So for forever now, forever, unless reintroduced from some other area, but forever, there will never, ever, ever in the history of the world be another lion going back into that area. They're gone, they're extinct. And this guy just shot the last one. So kudos to him. Thanks for destroying more of our beautiful cat species. You know, it irritates me. I hope it irritates you. It's time to let these farmers know that they've got to stop doing things like this. Norway is basically leading the pack in terms of ensuring that forests are protected, not only in Norway, but they're the first country in the world to officially ban not only deforestation within Norway, but in addition to it, all products that are linked to deforestation. Now, that's very interesting because they're not just attacking the area that's surrounding them. As you know, Norway's got beautiful natural forests. But in addition to it, they're banning the importing of any substances that are linked to deforestation. And this is a big first step. They're the first country to do this. So congratulations, Norway. They've done some amazing things before this. They contributed $1 billion to Brazil to restore rainforests. Just recently, they've contributed $250 million, $250 million to Guyana in relation to their reforestation efforts. These South American countries, obviously they've got a lot of natural forests. Norway is playing a big part in ensuring that those forests remain natural. Then another story also linked to forests, because I actually love trees, I think we all love trees, is what in California they just did a study. So this was in LA. They were basically doing an evaluation on how much so city urban species of kind of forests contribute. And when I say forest, I don't necessarily mean like build up clumps. I'm talking like the old trees that are lining the side of the road. And it was quite an interesting study because in as much as they say, look, in as much as like, a tree falls over and uproots the pavement, or, it drops leaves everywhere, people don't actually realize the value that trees are providing them. So I've had to jot this down because there was quite a few kind of values that trees gave, but I think it's important that we bring it up. We've got 10.32 million. So the total value of this, the estimated value of these trees was $1 billion. That was for all urban species, roadside species of trees in California, well, in this case in LA. They estimated that the trees were contributing to roughly $10.32 million of carbon sequestration, so removing carbon out the atmosphere. A very important one, specifically in places like LA, $18.15 million towards removing pollutants from the atmosphere, and so that's like your nasty things like smog and blah, blah, blah. Then another $41.5 million for retention of rainwater and keeping it cool enough so it actually allows the rainwater to come in. And then both maintaining kind of so leveling off the kind of temperature in LA, which was valued at $101 million. And then finally, and most importantly to anybody who has trees in their yard, they valued the total kind of amount that it contributes towards the value of your house at $834 million. And this basically summarized comes to about $1 billion, well, slightly over $1 billion. But it goes to show you how important those trees are, urban roadways, greening kind of programs that are running in various cities around the world. And more importantly, the value that it has to you as a tree owner in your property. You don't understand that a lot of people are actually buying places like this simply because of the trees, because it looks beautiful. And so I think it's very important that all of us keep that in our mind, and next time we have to rake up the leaves, just let's remember what those trees are actually doing for us, and more importantly, what they're really worth. So now I'm going to come to my last story, because I love this story. This is like a phenomenal story. If you only do one thing today, I really want you to share this one story. You sit down at a table, and you share this story, okay? This is so important. Because in about like 2 years ago, Chile was in a real power problem. Okay, they had no power, they had no kind of the electricity, so their grid was stressed, it was under massive strain. And they were facing soaring power costs. So as people in Chile, they were facing these massive power costs, and things were really rather miserable. And then the government was kind of split. Should we go nuclear or should we go renewable? And this was a big debate that raged inside of their parliament for a long period of time. And obviously the usual kind of nuclear lobbies try to play their part and convince and bribe and corrupt, and the usual kind of stuff that goes around nuclear power, trying to convince people that it's still viable. But for some reason, Chile actually took another road. They said, hey, listen, you know what, we're going to go PV. And they started building off, I think it was 264 gigawatts of PV. PV is photovoltaic, so solar panels, solar modules, big solar farms. And they've got 15 primary suppliers of these big solar farms sitting around the country. And all of these farms basically feed and contribute directly into grid. And in a way, they liberated the grid. And this is an important phrase. I'm going to come back to this. Okay, this is an important phrase. But in a nutshell, what's really happened is they noticed in the first year of operation that they roughly got 119 days where the amount of energy consumed versus the amount that they were creating reached zero, meaning the value of that energy was zero. And so they, for 119 days of the first year of operation, they gave away electricity. It was free. Now we're sitting midway through this year. They're already on 194 days where they've basically achieved zero parity, meaning that they're producing more power than they are consuming. Now, this is important because it has massive impacts, considering that Chile is actually still in process of building another, I think it's 164 gigawatts of solar. So Chile will be, without question, outside of Germany, which sporadically goes to zero, Chile may be the first off-grid country entirely. And yes, they've solved the whole storage. Oh, you can't have solar panels because it can't be stored. They've solved it. It's solved. It's in operation. People are not paying for power. And that's the true beauty of renewable energy. Renewable energy is free. It's power from the sun. And it just comes out, and once you've achieved a zero parity, meaning that you're producing more than you're using, it's free. Costs you nothing. But the genius of the Chilean government here was to say, you know what, we're not going to retain that and still bill the clients. We're actually going to give it away. And they zeroed people's bills because that's the power of renewable energy. Now, the important thing here, and I wanted to come back to this, was having an open grid. You see, in South Africa, the country I live, they've given away a sole producer license to a company here called Eskom that is in so many backhanded, dirty deals to buy coal with various companies and planning crazy ass nuclear concepts because they are an ingrained kind of component of some sick system that used to be. In a way, Eskom has allowed us to feed back to grid, but it is not viable for a small consumer. You in your house, you can go off grid with your batteries, but you can't feed back into grid. So they do their own solar farms, but solely with the objective of charging people. Now, in a country like South Africa, where we have 1,600 kind of watts of energy per square meter, so we've got a great energy density here in South Africa, and places like Chile, it is so completely viable for us that we can actually get rid of our grid completely. But the first thing that has to happen is the political will behind it, is the urgency of people forcing the governments that be, the power providers that be, to free the grid. Let us put in our solar panels and push power back into the grid and leave us alone. Stop with these ridiculous concepts of how much little money that we've still got to pay. Because here in South Africa, they've got incentive schemes. They've got schemes where you still have to pay, because ultimately, as a municipality, as a city, as a country, they're trying not to lose the money. But they're forgetting that all the money that they have ultimately comes from the pocket of the consumer. And that money that we're not spending paying them for dirty power, we can rather be spending on the mass economy. It's a direct improvement to the economy, and the first step is the political will that drives it. And then, once you've got the political will, the brains to free the grid, allow people to push power back onto grid without any legislation outside of safety legislation, safety standards. So I'd like to say, please, if you could talk about this, if you could tell your friends about this, tell your friends what happened in Chile. That so far, for 194 days in Chile, nobody's had an electricity bill. Tell me you would not like that. Who wouldn't like that? Which company wouldn't like that? Which company that is sweating under power bills wouldn't love to get a zero electricity bill and a bit of bonus from not having to pay some centralized provider for dirty power? We can do this. We can make this happen, but it takes us talking about it and applying power. And that really is the summary of what I wanted to do for the week. But also, more importantly, it is also the principle of what ENN is. I would love to talk to people in Chile. If anyone in Chile is watching this, I'd love to do like a little interview with you. Hell, interview yourself. Send in your story. Let us hear what you got to say. Let us experience what it is like to be where you are. But more importantly, let us know. Let's start taking this conversation of how we can save this planet and how we can save money and how we can save lives ultimately and species if farmers stop shooting the things. But how we can put this all together and make a change in this planet. Together we can do this. Share this. Let us know if you're going to participate and join the conversation. I'd like to thank you for your time in watching ENN. I'm going to go back to my freezing kind of winter's day, but I hope wherever you are, you're having a great day, and thanks for watching. Hello and welcome to the Environmental News Network. We are filming from the lovely Constantia Valley with helicopters flying overhead, birds tweeting all around us, and I am basically going to cover some information that is deemed extremely important in terms of the environment, and it is actually extremely important. I mean, it's actually crazy important, but you sitting there in your house may or may not be aware of this. But it is actually so important that we've gone out of our way just to reiterate certain points of this. So the story actually starts a long, long time. I'm going to start with is the Great Barrier Reef, which was the first kind of point that it started becoming to everyone's attention. As some of you may or may not have heard, the Great Barrier Reef has been in slow decline over a period of time. And what is known as coral bleaching, which is basically this beautiful, lovely, luscious coral, it basically bleaches into this dull gray or dull white kind of shade due to lack of nutrients and ocean acidification. So a report was released roughly about 3 weeks ago, in which it's the most comprehensive study ever done on the reef, which they're saying that roughly 83% of the Great Barrier Reef is now dead. The question is whether or not, well, it's the top surface, remember that. The question is whether or not the Great Barrier Reef will be able to recover from such an event. And it is deemed extremely unlikely that the Great Barrier Reef is going to be able to recover. So as a result of this, people have taken some dramatic steps. They've basically gone and they're looking at doing things that neutralize the pH content of the top surface of the water in an attempt to basically remove the acidification problem that is causing the bleaching on the Great Barrier Reef. The problem really is, though, is that what's happening on the Great Barrier Reef is not a micro problem. So it's not a local problem. The problem that's happening on the Great Barrier Reef is actually a macro problem. And what that means is that there is no action that can be taken by any person in Australia, New Zealand, any of the surrounding islands. There is absolutely nothing that they can do about it, because what you are really witnessing is the impact of the macro event of climate change that is having a direct impact not only on the Great Barrier Reef, but on reefs all around the world. And what that means is that if you start looking at the kind of articles we've put out much news articles about this that's been published rather widely, and there is kind of social activists that are trying to start campaigns, save the Great Barrier Reef, save the Great Barrier Reef, all over Facebook, Twitter, and various other groups. But the reality is that there is absolutely nothing that can be done to save the Great Barrier Reef, because it's a macro problem caused by overall climate change. So the thinking behind the Great Barrier Reef, if you understand that it is like the heart of the ocean. I mean, there nowhere else in the world is such a diverse, large kind of, place in the ocean found with such a density of life. So in a way, it's like the heart of the ocean. When you and I don't know how old you are, but when most of us, a lot of us were born, the Great Barrier Reef was an abundant, beautiful place. And inside of our time, we're actually going to see the death of the heart of the ocean. And, no social activism is going to stop it. The only thing that is going to stop it is if we eventually kind of move away from this idea of climate change. But bearing in mind that 83% of the reef is already dead, the probability of us being able to stop it is almost zero. So then, sorry, I've just been corrected, it was 93% of the reef is dead. That's actually right. So then it brings us to another component. So now take that story and throw that story on one side of your mind, okay? And then it comes to another part of the story. Now they were looking, a study was recently done on what is causing ocean acidification. But while they were studying that, they were looking at oxygen levels inside of the ocean. Now there is a relationship between the volume of plankton that is present in the water and their ability to sequester carbon dioxide. The ocean, despite what you may have heard, is actually the largest sequesterer of carbon dioxide. And when I say sequester, I mean that it takes in carbon dioxide and releases oxygen. So the ocean is actually the largest, what we call a carbon sink. So it's bigger than the rainforest, bigger than any other arboreal forest, it's bigger than any thing that we have done. The ocean actually does most of the work. So most of the oxygen that you're breathing comes from the ocean. And I'm going to come to that point in a little bit. I'm just going to explain a bit about the dynamics of what's happening in the ocean. So basically plankton are responsible for bringing oxygen from the surface of the water, bringing carbon dioxide from the surface of the water, and they harness that as they keep the carbon, they release the oxygen. But because the top surface of the water has been heated, because of the amount of sunlight that is impacting on the ocean, the plankton are no longer able to reach the top surface of the water, and thus, even though they are still filtering some carbon dioxide that is resident, because that's what acidification is, it's an increase in carbon dioxide, it's mainly carbon that they're picking up, and there's less oxygen going around the ocean. So the report came out that basically said by 2030, you would start to see off all shores, or you would start to see obvious signs of lack of oxygen inside of the water. And there's another report that came out, but it's kind of minor by comparison, but it's still significantly important, is that the plankton is responsible for bringing that oxygen right from the top surface levels right to all the levels going down the marine chain as far as it can. And what this does is it enables a healthy marine environment where creatures of all different kind of levels in the ocean are capable of eating or breathing. So with the loss of oxygen in the water, with the reduction in oxygen in the water, and with the growing kind of losses of oxygen in the water, the impact on marine life is projected to be devastating. Devastating. So what you're talking about is the loss of massive marine chains. So where you and I now can walk into the store and pick up like fish, a large proportion of those fish are they're dying. They're dying. So because they're just dying of suffocation, there is nothing for them to actually breathe. So the impacts, the knock-on effect impacts that this has is dramatic. So now if you take that and put that in the side as well, along with our little story about the Great Barrier Reef, what you're left with is an interesting little study that's been done, and something that we've actually here at Brave Green World, we've been monitoring for quite some time. In fact, it was a question that was raised a while back. When you were in school, you got taught, so you said like, how much oxygen is actually in the atmosphere, okay? So the common phrase that we throw around is 21%. 21% of oxygen is available in the atmosphere, which means that for every breath that you take, you're taking in some helium, some argon, some oxygen, but of that, 21% is actually oxygen. Now, if you Hello and good morning, and welcome to the Mother Channel, the channel that brings you news, documentaries, and interviews about cutting-edge climate change information, and today, overfishing and the problems with overfishing. First, I'm going to go through a couple of stories that